In this episode, we're covering Pillar 2, which is mental and intellectual wellness. A couple of episodes ago, we discussed the difference between wellness and well-being. Last week, we discussed Pillar number 1, which was around physical, covering exercise, sleep, and nutrition. So now we're trying to take this a step further and seeing how our mental and intellectual wellness helps frame our lives and connects back to the body, because there's a huge mind-body connection. I thought it'd be interesting just jumping straight in if you wanted to define in that sentence as governed by the Global Wellness Institute, how they defined mental wellness.
Yeah, so mental health and wellness, as we kind of understand it, is not just simply the absence of a mental health condition. It really is rather the state of well-being in which individuals are able to live their fullest potential, cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively, and contribute to their community, which is a really nice, all-encompassing global aspect of it that really describes mental wellness.
Yeah, and I like that. I love that. I know it's one of our driving forces is about us living to our fullest potential, but also helping other people do the same. Covering being able to cope with the stresses and strains of life, anything that gets thrown at you, I think is huge. There's a lot of pressure on us through, work and society. It's really important to develop those skill sets. And I think developing them is important. It's something you got to work on. We think about working on our physical health, but we really have to work on our mental health too. And as part of that, the Global Wellness Institute has these pathways to mental wellness. I think we're trying to do this structured in this episode because this is a complex topic of which we are not, medical experts in. So we're trying to formulate it and try and take some great information that's already out there and look at the structure that they present and then interpret it through our lens or through our frame of how it's interacted with our life. So do you want to touch on those 4?
Yeah, so globally, the 4 are, the first one is activity and creativity. Then we're going to talk about growth and nourishment, rest and rejuvenation, and connection and meaning. And those 4, I feel personally, have all very valid points when you focus on that really contribute to mental wellness.
Yeah, and they split them into 2 sides under each of those categories. There's the mental or the internal versus the physical or external. So it'd be great to just touch on them and just see how we feel what their subjects that they're covering, how it seems to be relevant to our lives and hopefully the lives of everybody. So on the mental internal, they talk about play and hobbies, making and creating, learning and discovery.
And that really falls under activity and creativity. Thinking about creativity, from my point, it's really is, for me, it's a release creativity. We obviously do it and it's our profession, but thinking back as a kid, I would love sitting at the table, drawing with my pens, making things, creating things. It's always been a real kind of release, and it got me in my little zone, and it just felt very at calm and at peace, which I feel is a really good way to focus your mind on something creative and therefore just really take care of your mind.
Yeah, hobbies were big for me growing up. I still maintain hobbies now. I wonder for a lot of people that don't or are not fortunate to have a creative outlet through their profession, I wonder how that may have been diminished now through the invent of technology, being glued to a screen at work all day, then coming home or commuting, looking at a phone or an iPad, and then to the TV. So I wonder how creativity is being diminished just generally in society. And I guess there's different ways of creating now. I mean, what's interesting is that people are becoming experts in fields that seem to be a profession. So people now are being able to, produce and create their own podcasts or their own YouTube channel. So there's a different kind of creativity, but maybe less of what we thought about growing up as kids, that painting and drawing and sticking and gluing.
And then thinking more about the external side, which leads a little bit more into physical activity when we're thinking about movement, fitness, exercise, sports. So that's more the external side that can really promote and make you flourish in the mental wellness.
Yeah, for me, it's twofold. One, it's just when you do, endorphins are released when you do physical activity, you get those chemical releases that make you feel good. And then on the flip side of that, as you see maybe a change in your body composition or those things, there's a mental boost to your self-esteem or your appearance. And what is really interesting here is that they do connect the mental with the physical, and that's that real mind-body connection. They're not mutually exclusive. They have to be tied together. One supports the other, and it becomes a supportive circle or a supportive loop. One thing you didn't really touch on there was learning and discovery. I know you're constantly learning.
Yeah. So learning and discovery, I feel like that curious mind is really something that stimulates the mind in the right direction, because it makes you less focused on the negative things and makes you less focused on the stress, because it's more something that's moving you forward and makes you grow. And I feel like that's for me personally, I just really enjoy that mental activity of learning and discovering. It just really makes me feel like I'm expanding my mind. And that gets you out of that stuck mindset of really focusing on things that are rather pulling us down and is more connected to negativity than positivity. So like you said, I really enjoy that. And that for me personally really leads to my mental wellness, is to constantly learn, grow, and then contribute.
That's the key, isn't it? We can absorb as much knowledge as we want, but then giving it back out to the world in your interpretation of what you've learned is, I think, super important. And that's the ultimate goal. I know for us, actually doing the podcast was a way for us to learn. It's forcing us to research much deeper into topics that maybe before we only had a relatively surface level understanding of. So that's really key.
Yeah, absolutely. The deep dive into that kind of knowledge and wisdom and understanding, and then sitting here and explaining certain things that makes you understand as much how much you don't know, and then gathering and then expanding on what you know. So I feel like to me that's a learning. What we're doing right now is just even talking about topics that we're really passionate about, but only have a very small percentage of real understanding. But constantly reading about it, exposing yourself to it, really makes you grow in that field.
And you mentioned the word passion. That really is it. We don't ever see it really. It's just a part of who we are. We naturally get drawn to reading articles or researching things around a lot of these topics because, like you said, we want to kind of selfishly gain knowledge, but then from a contribution want to be able to put it back out and help people in their own lives, which, it's really is passion driven. What about the next one? Growth and nourishment.
Yeah, so the next kind of pathway to mental wellness is described as growth and nourishment. And again, starting on the internal side, we can look at that a lot from the lens of self-help, therapy, coaching, mentoring, cognitive enhancement, and brain training. We've done a lot of coaching, like you mentioned in some of the previous sessions last year. And this has really been kind of our internal growth and nourishing our mind. It's expanding our consciousness, it's expanding the fields, the way we see the world. And that really leads to an internal way of mental wellness for us. Looking at the external, thinking about growth and nutrition, that's a little bit more obvious. That's kind of touching on
diet and nutrition, and then they mentioned drugs and supplements. We mentioned a lot about diet and nutrition last week in the physical pillar. It's very difficult. There is a quadrillion different fad diets out there, and the reason there are is because so many. I think it plays into the people's psychology or their lack of discipline or motivation that they don't work because it's not about the diet per se. I think it's trouble with each of our individual motivations or disciplines. And I very much spoke last week about having a North Star, a purpose or a why that pulls you towards wanting to make that change much, and that pull is much stronger than that short-term satisfaction or fix you might get by, breaking the diet, binging on something. I think it's really important to have that balance so you don't live completely strictly. I think you need to have that avenue, that escape, not cut everything or every food type out of your life. It doesn't work for me. And I just find that, it really is it's much bigger than focusing on a diet. It's about having that North Star. And I think one of the things we learned a lot in our coaching last year was the reason why you're doing it has got to be beyond yourself. It has to be connected to a much bigger purpose. If you think about journaling down, why do I want to lose this weight, or why do I want to change my body composition? It needs to have the personal reason, and then how it could positively impact way beyond yourself, how it could impact your family, your friends, your community, or people around you in your workplace. So I'm adamant people have to find their North Star, their why, that will be the stronger pull towards than just for a short space of time trying to restrict a certain calorie intake or a type of food group.
Yeah, when I really think about the two words, growth and nourishment, when I think about that on the internal side and in connection with the mind, a growing mind, growing your mind, expanding your mind, and then also nourishing it. Nourishing it for me is also really being conscious about what you listen to, what you read, what you let in your mind, because all of those things really influence how we see the world, how we think, how we find direction. So we can really, if we take a lot of negative worldly views on a lot of negative thoughts, that's really how we're projecting it out in our own mind to the world, and that's what we're therefore then attracting. So it can be that kind of real negative loop. I really like the idea. It's very abstract, but I really like the idea about growing and nourishing my mind. Mm-hmm. And it's a very easy thing not to think about it. But anyone who's been exposed to even a really mild form of anxiety, depression, to have a pathway, let's say, through that, to really focus on that, to get out of it, it's really amazing what a good tool that can be. That almost kind of leads me a bit to the next one, which I'm really passionate about, talking about rest and rejuvenation. And that, again, on the internal part, we're talking about meditation and mindfulness. And the reason I'm so passionate about it is because this is really something that I've found makes a huge difference to me. And the reason it makes a big difference is that we can't almost find a life or live a life that's completely stress-free, at least if we want to be in a normal society, we have a business, we're entrepreneurs, we're growing, we're exposing ourselves to a growing economy. That's very hard not to be stressed or get in the direction of stress. But the important part is because stress, as we know, is really a big contributor to health, to illnesses as well. It's like really to mental health. To find a way through mindfulness and meditation to never let it go to the point where stress turns into negative and negativity, because positive stress definitely can motivate you, give you a push, give you like a little bit of adrenaline to move forward. So stress isn't always negative. But to balance it, that you don't let it go to the tipping point where it can really affect your mental health. And I keep going on about how busy and noisy everything is around us, and taking these moments of pause, mindfulness, silence, and just really letting your mind calm down. Because even if it's positive, all the influences we have of learning, growing, reading, it still is a lot. It's a lot to digest, a lot going on in our mind. And if we're too overstimulated, I feel like that can often lead to just exhaustion and burnouts. So the moments of mindfulness and meditation, which Is for some people that haven't tried it, it can be a bit daunting of thinking about sitting there in silence. But there's so many amazing ways of meditation, so many different types of meditation as well, that you can really find something for yourself that works for you. Breath work is a really good one too. And just really starting small. And the key is to integrate it into your like daily routine, because this is when you can monitor and not let it go, the stress levels go too far. You can always reel it back in with that sort of mindfulness.
Yeah, I would totally agree. The rest is super important, and it's not rest as in sleeping. It's having that mental break from the overload of social or mainstream media, and like you said, even just continually reading or learning, or absorbing. It's a lot. Your brain and mind and body need a rest. I know I've done a fair amount of meditation to, I mentioned before, get over some anxieties that I've had for most of my life, and now I do it much more as a, like with you, a daily practice. It is difficult in the beginning, and I know in the beginning I felt like something magical was about, like I'm waiting for this magical thing, or I think like a lot of people, you're trying to stop all thoughts in your head. It's like you're supposed to clear your mind of everything, but what I really found is more about coming in, I think a lot of it for me is being in tune with your breath and just letting your breath guide you in and out. It's a bit like waves in the ocean. It's just waves come in, waves go out. And I found the simplest way, because often when we shut our eyes to do this, a million thoughts pop into your head. And if you can continue just to keep going back to the breath, that's the simplest way to keep some sort of mindfulness or concentration in that moment. The other good way that I learned as well is to think about all your thoughts as cars on a freeway or on a motorway, and they're going back and forth, and within your sort of main field of vision, you can let that thought or that car or truck come in carrying that thought, but once it goes out of your periphery vision, just let it go. And that was a really good way for me to visualize thoughts, acknowledge them, but then just let them drift off, and off they go. And you have to develop it as a skill, and like anything, that's what we said, working on your physical body is a skill, working on your mental state, your mindfulness or your meditation is a skill. But I feel fortunate that I've got to a point that I can pretty quickly, in pretty much any environment, through certain breathing techniques, just go straight into a fairly calm meditative state. And that last thing is doing something like that non-sleep deep rest protocol, so through Dr. Andrew Huberman or others. It's just 10 minutes a day at lunchtime, break up your day, break up your afternoon, and it really makes a difference.
Yeah, it does pay off.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. What's some of your routines around meditation?
So I like to, I know we've kind of both are doing it together now. I like to really, first thing when I get up, before really doing anything other than maybe drinking some water, is slipping right into even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes meditation. A little hack that I'm doing right now is having my meditation pillow at the bottom of the bed. So I literally slide out of bed, get into that seat. For me, that's almost like a different routine than just stepping out of bed and getting up. Now it's the getting on the pillow, which is that instant motivation to be there. Then it's that real consciousness, 5-10 minutes in the morning, ideally longer, but even if that's the starting point.
Before you look at your phone, I assume.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely, before. That's what I'm saying. I mean, the only thing I really do is maybe drink some water beforehand. Mm-hmm. But it's the first thing, because it's really how you set up your mind for the day. It makes a big difference. And I used to first thing get on my emails first thing in the morning, because you constantly, especially as business owners, you constantly have that responsibility. You constantly feel like if I don't react now, if I don't know about it, something can go wrong. It is not sustainable. It's not something that you long-term can do and really be of really good service to your clients. So that first time in the morning is really about how you set your intention for the day, how you wake up, the consciousness you go into the day with. And also the kind of listening to that moment of peace and silence sometimes really suddenly you come with an answer, you come up with an answer to something that you might have been pondering over the night before during the day. In that moment of silence, your mind suddenly really, not just your mind, your internal voice, your intuition really leads you to that answer. So that's one of the reasons I really find that very powerful. Once you break through that initial discomfort, once you get into it, once you know how good it makes you feel, you don't want to miss it. And it just becomes, and like I'm always saying, it needs to become more of a ritual and needs to become part of your identity, it needs to become part of your lifestyle. That's just something that you do. That's who you are.
I believe it's becoming much more part of a lot of people's lives now, or much more mainstream. I remember we went to HD Summit in maybe 2019 in Florida, and we did a group meditation by, is it Jesse?
Yeah, with the Big Quiet.
Jesse from the Big Quiet. And I remember we were fairly well versed in meditation, so we just fell into it pretty quickly. But after that group meditation, I remember speaking to a lot of people who found it very awkward, didn't really know what to do. It was uncomfortable. And we had that conversation with a lot of people and kind of explained our viewpoint of it. And then coincidentally, this year, 2022, post-COVID, we also did it. Jesse was there again from the Big Quiet. We did it probably with a very similar group of people. And the energy in the room was completely different. And I wonder if that's a post-COVID thing where people have adopted some of those initiatives into their lives, and it's become much more integrated into people's wellness or well-being journeys.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more of an awareness there, and I generally feel that we're going through such a big shift at the moment. It's a real paradigm shift. It's an opened, expanded consciousness. And for me, it's the way technology has evolved. We also almost as the antidote to that, really expanding our mind, our consciousness, and going back to those healing modalities that are really ancient wisdom that we're using now, because we need that, and it taps us into more that grounded feeling. And I think people are more open to it. And then when you're open to it, you try it. And once you try it and you see the result, and I'm convinced that everyone who gives it a proper chance will see the result, and it makes you feel good, you don't stop something that makes you feel good. You just need to give it enough of a chance to really try it out, to get that feeling of that it makes a difference to you.
Yeah, it's great. And one thing I want to touch on here, because they also talk about the physical and external, they talk about sensory experiences where we're talking about light, sound, aroma, or touch therapies. We've done quite a lot of sound bowl meditations recently, and they're fascinating too. I remember the first time I did one, it was almost overwhelming, the intensity of the sound and whatever energetically happens through your body. It can kind of leave you feeling a little bit disorientated I think especially if you kind of resist it in the beginning. But lately we've done a few quite regularly.
Yeah, I mean, we try to do it once a week, really. It's our new Friday happy hour.
It is our new Friday happy hour. And it's a great, as you said, antidote to the week. It's instead of, maybe going out and socializing heavily, eating and drinking, it's a nice bookend to the week. It sets the intention for the weekend. And yeah, I really enjoy it and start to be more in tune with it. And yeah, I genuinely look forward to doing them.
I mean, one benefit that we really experience, which is also mentioned on the external part of the mental wellness, is sleep, which we covered last week too. Generally the meditation and also the sound bowl, especially when you do it a little bit before bedtime, really prepares your body and calms your nervous system down, that you're ready to make the best out of your night's sleep. You're not fighting from being on at 100% to suddenly being down to zero. It's really that preparation for it. And then the sleep becoming so much better. That's really another benefit of it too.
Yeah, I can agree more. It really does, that me 10, 15 years ago would have listened to a lot of this and thought, yeah, I'm sure there does have some benefits, but wouldn't have fully embraced it or believed it.
It's not for me.
It's maybe not for me, yeah. But genuinely, I'm testament to, getting into it. Like you said, consistently doing, working on it, being part of your daily practice. Yeah, and it's a few minutes out of your day, which can easily be wasted, on social media or something else that's not moving you forward. So, I'm all in.
That's good. So the next one is kind of one level deeper when we're really looking at the last pathway, as the Global Wellness Institute describes it for mental wellness, is connection and meaning. Then on the internal, it's going into religion, spirituality, beliefs, altruism, gratitude, and compassion.
Yeah, when I think about touching on those, gratitude's a huge one. And from a real practical point of view, as I mentioned, I suffered a lot of anxiety. What I've learned through research and teachings is that the brain can't think of two things at the same time. So if in a moment of anxiety you turn towards thinking about something that you're grateful for, it stops the anxiety in your tracks because, like I said, your brain can't think of two things at once. So it's a really good tool to break that cycle of negative or spiraling thoughts when we get into an anxious state, is really genuinely being grateful for something. And it doesn't mean going deep into your sort of memory bank and thinking about gratitude of like, oh yeah, the time somebody bought me a gift or something. It can just be simple as being grateful for, just being alive at this moment in time, or seeing the blue sky, or the green trees, or something in nature. It can just be something that you can generally connect to, and I think it needs to be heartfelt. You can't just go, oh, I'm grateful for it. It really needs to come from the heart, and it really does work. And it's, that coupled with some breathing techniques can really stop anxiety in its tracks.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that it needs to come from the heart, and that's really something, because again, same as meditation, I'm very passionate about practicing gratitude, is when you focus on your heart space and you can feel it in your heart and opening in your heart. And again, that also takes a bit of practice. It's got such a magnetism and a power that gratitude just really radiates. And we kind of all know what we emanate, the energies we also attract. So why wouldn't we want to do one of the most beautiful energies, which is connected to the heart and gratitude? You almost can't get a higher frequency than that. So the things you can attract to that is really wonderful. What I found helpful too is when I was beginning the kind of gratitude practice, is I was reading somewhere, when you can't really, if it's too abstract and you can't really feel it, you need to think of something that's really dear to you and think about what it would feel like if it wasn't there, if you lost it. And that, I feel, is a very easy way then to tap more into being really grateful for that thing, that person, that memory. So for me, there was a beginning feeling of just experiencing what does gratitude feel like because we know a little bit, we're more familiar with loss and not having something is sometimes easier to tap into and have as a feeling. But when you tap into that and then transform it into what it would feel like if you didn't lost that person, if you didn't lost that thing, if you didn't lost that experience, then you can really develop that really heartfelt gratitude.
Yeah.
And same with meditation. Once you're in that flow, once you're in that rhythm of feeling that, that's kind of where you can expand on it.
Yeah, it's a very powerful tool. And I think we can just on a face value normal level just become ungrateful or not remember to be grateful for so much that's positive in our lives. I know there's sayings around being grateful for where you are right now, because probably 5 years ago this was a goal of where you wanted to be, and now you're there, you're already on to the next goal. So sometimes it's to stop and remember that 5 years ago this is the life you dreamed of, or this was the thing you wanted to achieve. So it's great to keep moving forward, but it's part of the journey. It's recognizing the journey and not the end goal, and it's who you become along that journey, which is really, really important too. And it also talks about beliefs. I think all of us are really guided by our beliefs, whether it's our viewpoint on the world or what we believe, say, politically or socially. And what's interesting and what we've learned is that we typically find or seek out evidence that reinforces our belief structure. So we know that if you want to make a dramatic change in your life, you can change your beliefs. And that's been really it's been really powerful for us because you may have limiting beliefs or a limiting mindset. So if you change that and break that wide open, then really the world is your oyster. And just transforming that approach to life, you're not limiting how far you can go on your journey, which for me also comes back to gratitude, because you get one shot at this. It's just like, I believe, certainly for me, it's so important that I feel like I take every opportunity with gratitude to achieve everything that I possibly can, and along the way grow and help others. And we talk about that growth and contribution being the two
kind of core values.
Two core values that result in ultimate fulfillment. And that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to have a fulfilled life. We hear that quote or that phrase about success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And it's true. That's why a lot of people are unhappy. They achieve their goal, whether it's buying that amazing house, car, that relationship they thought they wanted, or the $1 billion. And if you get to that point and you're not happy, then you're not truly fulfilled. So therefore you've failed, and it is a very sad place to be, because then what's next? If you reach that point where you think something's going to change your life and it doesn't, and normally it doesn't, especially if it's materialistic. So that's where you need to look inside, religiously, spiritually, whatever your pathway is, to find that true deep fulfillment in life.
I think the common denominator with that is, if it's spiritual, religious, it's more the understanding that there's something bigger than yourself, that you're contributing to something bigger than yourself. That's really, I feel like, where our life's purpose, our connection is way more powerful than just thinking with the ego about our own lives, about our own selves, and about our obstacles and hurdles. I think that really big connection. And I think going back to that consciousness that I feel like is really arising with people, is that's what people sense now and feel. They feel way more connected, that our life impacts not just ourselves, our close families, friends, our community. It's a much bigger picture, that your emotion, your feeling can affect someone across the pond. So that's how it's really important that you make sure that when you have a negative emotion, is it really necessary to be grumpy, to be upset, to be aggressive about something? Because the ripple on effect is much bigger than just to your own self.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's a big. I mean, it's a big topic.
It is a big topic. All of this, when I think about mental wellness or intellectual wellness, everything comes back to me. I keep saying it: finding your North Star, finding your why. Read Simon Sinek's book, Find Your Why. He's also got another book about how to discover your why, where you can literally go through his book and find out what your why is. Why do you get out of bed in the morning? He talks very much about, we typically know what we do and how we do it, especially in business. It's like, what you can talk about what you do and how you do it, but the why of why you do something is a much harder thing to pinpoint. And he's really incredible of way he will extract it out of you. And it typically comes back to how you were in your childhood, how you naturally interacted with people, or what really made you happy, what really made you excited. What was that like lasting memory that you can't forget? And it's something normally around that. I think he says by the time you're in your late teens or early 20s, you have formed who you are and your why is already built into you. So it's not about, I don't think, and I don't want to misspeak here, but it's not about thinking something up of like, I want this to be my why, and then changing it every 5 years. It's typically something that is deep inside our DNA of who we already are. And it's about extracting that and then finding that as your, I keep saying, North Star to move you forward. And when I think about, and I think he always touches on that, your personal why and your business why, if you run your own business, they're typically the same. They might be worded slightly differently.
But that's where you bring your personality and your own purpose to your business.
Yeah.
That's where it makes it very authentic and personal.
Yeah. And when I think about my personal why, I say it's to improve every aspect of my life so I can positively impact the lives of others. And the nice thing about when he describes about finding a why, it should be gigantic that you could never fully achieve it. So it's something that you're always working on and working towards. And then when I think about our business one, it's very similar. You know, it has the same, you know, backstory or backbone to it that ties very much to my personal one. Now, it's tricky when we think about two business owners having the same why. So it has to have a bit of both of us in it, which, you know, we're fortunate that we do.
I mean, what makes me think on the personal level as well, I feel from me, what I was reading is that the purpose for all of us is really to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to be of service to someone. But the uniqueness comes in what do you uniquely bring to that? What makes you you? And then when you were saying about going back and tapping into your childhood, what's interesting with that is that the childhood is probably showing our purest essence of who we are. We're not tainted by negative experiences, by society, by people telling us what we can and can't do. So this is really, from a childhood's lens, a dream of who we are and how we see the world, what the world can be. So that's why I find that really interesting to go back to the childhood and finding your essence and what is the unique thing you bring to the world that you can add to your purpose. Because the other thought with that is when you think about adding something, especially now, everyone is doing what you're doing. When you look around, you feel like someone is already doing what you are doing. So why add another podcast? Why add another design practice? Why add another creativity to anything? It's how you bring your authentic self to it that makes a difference. That makes a difference to it being different and also attracting different things to different people, because it's really about who do you resonate with and how can you help someone else by putting yourself out there.
Yeah, and it's right. And I just wanted to, you said, I know exactly what you meant. You were talking about when you're a child and you have this purest essence of yourself. You did sort of say, you know, I think what you were talking about is that you weren't as influenced by the outside world or the environment around you. Obviously, you can have very negative experiences in your childhood, which may actually form part of who you become. So sometimes that real negative moment in your life can actually form who you become. And
that's true.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
Yeah. So but I think you're right. It's something that's formed in our childhood without as much of the noise and influence that maybe we now seek out or we're bombarded with. You're not quite as exposed to it. So, I love it. And I didn't mention for our business, we talk about empowering people to become the best version of themselves for the benefit of humanity. So again, it's this gigantic goal and cause with the idea that the environments we create enable or facilitate people to become the best versions of themselves, especially in the wellness realm. And then for the benefit of humanity, when I think about that, it's about people improving themselves to then pay it forward. So it has a ripple effect through, you know, society or people's communities, which, you know, is what that connection and meaning is all about.
When we were talking about just external, internal, on those 4 pathways that we're looking at on the note, what you were saying, that's for me like an external way of describing it. The internal way is that we also really pay attention to who we're working with, who our staff is, who our consultants are, who the contributors are to bring our designs to life. And that's really important for us to touch that element as well and give everyone kind of that sense of growth and empowerment and just really coming to work and knowing that you're growing. It's not just a job you're coming to do. It's really just something that you want to come to because there's something else that you feel like you're touched by, and it's a safe platform to really grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And be valued.
Yeah. Valuing people is so important. I think that's where it comes into, you know, having compassion for people. The hierarchy within a company, it doesn't need to be, you know, bosses and owners versus their employees. It's everybody is contributing to hopefully an end goal. And everybody has a vital role to play in that, whether it's us in an architectural business or somebody mass producing something in a factory. Every single person has a key role in making that thing come to life. So we're very compassionate about, people, and like you said, external consultants, construction teams, the person screwing in the last light bulb compared to the artisan who's made this beautiful piece of furniture. They all contribute, maybe sometimes in different weights, but they all have a vital part to play in the end result. So yeah, valuing and having compassion on people, I think, is really important.
We kind of deviated a little bit, but it's still very important what we was talking about.
Yeah, and I think just to summarize, and so some of this, when you look at it, it seems like a lot, but when you get in a rhythm and put it into your daily life, it's just a small portion of your life that has a major impact. And typically we waste a lot of time in our lives through things that don't necessarily serve us. So it's really just flipping that. And for me, I keep saying it, I can't reiterate more that having that pull towards that big reason why you want to do all those things, I think gives you a much better chance of success and consistency of discipline than just trying these things on a whim or a one-off basis. And of course, they're going to have benefits to your life, but they're going to have much more of a holistic benefit if you have put that big picture in mind. So we want to talk a little bit about design and how the environments that we create can support health and intellectual wellness. It's a minefield. Some of it's very abstract, some of it's pretty obvious. For me, it's, you got to really start with the base intention, like and everyone has to be on the same page. Is like, what is this space? What is this building? What is this facility? What is its main driving purpose? And some of them are going to be very specialist, where we talked about, wellness retreats or destinations. It might be in the medical field, or it might be something that's not related to health and wellness at all, but needs to have elements of design in it that support people in environments where they're not exposed to nature or elements that really nurture them internally and externally.
Yeah, I want to touch on, and last week I was mentioning the well building standard, because the interesting part really is there's a whole concept dedicated to the mind. And the well building standard, really the goal there is to improve the cognitive and emotional health and well-being of those people that are living, working, learning, or spending time in the built space. And that used to be a very abstract thought when you think about cognitive and emotional health in the built environment. Obviously, we are very influenced by the buildings we're in. And for example, in the well building standard, when you think about design and going back to the mindfulness thought that we talked about earlier, I think this is a really great concept where it's about, and specifically for office building, incorporating relaxation and restorative spaces, so that you really make sure that there is a space for your employees that you can go to that is not connected to work. During the day, we spoke about mindfulness breaks during the day being so important, that you can leave your desk and you go to a dedicated space that has lighting that can change, dimmed lighting, that has comfortable seating, that has privacy, thermal comfort. You might integrate natural sounds. You were talking about the connection to nature. So it's either adding biophilic elements, so there is a perceived connection to nature even when you're indoors, or it's exposing you to nature views, or even better, if the space has the ability to open up to the outside and then have natural views to the outside. And those goes back to the mindfulness breaks during the day. And I feel like that's something that can really help with stress and help with burnouts if those spaces are provided, especially in your work environment. That's where you're exposed to most of the stress. You spend a lot of time, I shifted a little bit with COVID, but usually you spend a lot of time in an office space. So I really love that part of the concept. And then also connecting people, and that can go into the hospitality field as well, connecting people to the place, like really celebrating the cultural, local, historic background through art and initiatives. And that really, I feel like for the mind concept, it connects you deeply, it roots you to where you are. So that's another really great way of integrating it into design and affecting your emotional and cognitive perception.
Yeah, and for us, we really want to make sure it's a really thought out from the beginning, and it's not an add-on at the end. And like most things, anything that is deemed to cost additional money can sometimes be, scrapped out in the first round of value engineering or VE exercises. So holding that true, and that's why I mentioned in the beginning, what is the purpose of this, and trying to make sure that we hold on to those initiatives that we generally believe are going to serve the people in the building better. I think of a lot of things being either something that is passive or something that actively encourages you to take part in it. A lot of those initiatives, when we think about the lighting or the air quality, that's passive, which is great. It's almost subconscious. People may be aware of it. They may just feel slightly different in the space. They may not have such sort of fatigue because of the air quality, and the light quality is great. We know that having lighting in buildings that can follow the circadian rhythm is really important. Mentioned before, Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about getting natural daylight in the eyes first thing in the morning, and it helps regulate your sleep. So there's a lot of science now around how important lighting is. And on the flip side, dimming it down, more moodier light in the evening. When we think about the active participation, it's things like, we know just simple things like being, taking the stairs. And you mentioned last week about encouraging stairwells to be designed more
attractive and beautiful.
Yeah, more attractive, beautiful, to encourage people to use them. There's initiatives where the elevator will only stop on every second floor. So if you're unfortunate to, work on one of those floors either side, then you're going to have to use the stairs. And those things add up. They add up even more if it's part of or it's for somebody who already lives in that space where they're mindful, they're active. And this is where another kind of conflict comes in for me. It's a lot of these proactive things will support the people that already live that kind of lifestyle. Excuse me. The people that don't, sometimes they are not. It's that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So it's really finding ways of making people want to try something for the first time, or you don't want to force anybody into it, but force in the way that you almost sort of give them no choice in a positive way. So when we think about this, the staircase or the elevator example, maybe the elevator is not as prominent and the staircase is, and just rethinking how we can design some of those spaces. And then there has to be, I think, a bit of a learning there. Is like, that's what excites me the most, is finding somebody that, they don't even know what they could do to help themselves, and through education or an initiative, something that just sets them off on a small journey to getting better, either mentally, intellectually, or physically in their well-being. I think that's what excites me about designing buildings, that they can actively participate in somebody's wellness journey. And yeah, it is very exciting.
I mean, going back to what we touched on earlier about this kind of more raised consciousness and awareness around health and wellness and your wellness lifestyle, which really got accelerated through COVID, we keep hearing, we know there's a lot more of a consumer demand in the hotel industry, but also in the kind of work corporate environment, where people do seek out jobs and employers now that have that awareness and offer those tools in the buildings, that either the buildings are certified or have these initiatives. And one thing I want to touch on from the Well Building Standard, where we're talking about the design, that's one part. And then it goes into the operations and the culture of a company as well, where especially the mental health and wellness can really be improved as well through programming. Like some companies, they offer education awareness efforts on mental health and well-being. It's training courses related to that. It's restorative mindfulness programs where you give access to meditations and yoga. It's policies around trying to mitigate burnouts and stresses. It's restorative breaks. We spoke about creating those spaces that give you a restorative break. But if your company policy is still so strict and doesn't feel like you should leave the desk, you kind of gotta be on your desk and work through the hours, and doesn't allow you the breaks, then there's no good to have that space. So it's really kind of, the policies are really important around that too. Establishing healthy working hours as well. We struggle sometimes a little bit with the kind of demand around work-life balance that's going on right now in our society, and that's a fine line that we can maybe discuss on another time as well. But it's still really understanding that an unsustainable amount of focus, work, and stress does not lead to more productivity. So it's really kind of thinking about that too. Some companies even provide clinical self-assessments that are done by a third party that give you the opportunity to do a health screening on your mental health as well, to kind of check in and assess where you're at. So I think that's a really great initiative too, and generally offering mental health support. So interesting part from going from design to programming to policy. So it's really, when we talk about holistic approach in architecture and design, we talk about holistic approach in health and wellness, and then we talk about a holistic approach in design aspects that lead to health and wellness, but it's also got to encompass the culture, the policies, the programming of a space. Because like we said, we build those beautiful restorative spaces and they can't be used because the policies are in place specific to a work environment, then it's only half of the battle, half of the good.
And that's what makes it really challenging, isn't it? We as designers and architects can do everything that we can, but yeah, if the policies aren't in place, but I guess that's what we went back to before, that, what is the purpose? What is the foundation? What is the goal for what we're creating? And we would hope to think that those policies and initiatives are built into the company structure or culture. Otherwise, we wouldn't be designing those facilities to facilitate that. So it's but yeah, it's tricky, and I think of everything in tiers of what's going to have the most impact on people's lives. And there's a lot of advertising and marketing about how things can dramatically change your life, when we know ultimately it's not true, and they certainly won't in isolation. They may. You talked about stacking before. We go back to pillar one last week when we think about the physical, exercise, sleep, and nutrition. If you get those right, probably 80% of the time, you're going to be in a pretty good place. Then you can add other things into it. When we look at now, what's so popular is, cold exposure through cold plunges, heat exposure through saunas or steam rooms. Those things for me are just nice add-ons. But if you just did them only on themselves, they would have a benefit. But they will have so much more benefit if you get the three fundamental things right. And I think it's the same with a lot of these elements that we design into buildings. It's that they can have an incremental change and positive impact, but they're only going to go so far if a lot of the persons, and this is the other problem, that you're only capturing a person for a portion of their time or of their week. If it's an office building, say they're there for 8 hours a day, what are they doing the other 16 hours of the day? So it's tricky. There's a balance between ticking boxes because it sounds good on paper, and then how much positive impact is it going to have on somebody's life? And I think that's where we have to cut through all the noise and through all the weeds and just be honest about it and find out what are those things that are really, really going to make a difference. And so much of that, I think, is around education rather than those small initiatives. It's a balance. It's a tricky one. Yeah. But it's one that we need to keep working on. And like you said, post-COVID, I think so many people now have become aware or reevaluated their own wellness and well-being journeys, that, like you said, there's competition out there for either companies or buildings
in
that
the corporate
support,
world, yeah.
in the corporate
in your
world.
work environment.
Yeah. And, and it transcends everything. And I know we mentioned last week, we talked about wellness homes. I think wellness homes are going to be really coming to the forefront, where there's infrastructure initiatives like we talked about, cold plunging, sauna, etc., being, not boxes that you buy and add on to your house. They're already incorporated into your house, those mindful meditation spaces. We know through sacred geometry how you can lay out and design a house has energetic benefits that ground you in your space. So it's fascinating, and I think what's the most exciting is that there's an awareness and an openness to it now, whereas before it might have been seen for only one sort of sector of society that were deeply into this. I think we see so many people, and especially leaders in professions and communities, are doing a lot of this themselves. Then it normalizes a lot of it, and which is only a positive and a benefit. So yeah, it's a fascinating time. It's a complex, tricky subject, but what I take from it is that mental and intellectual wellness needs to be worked on like your body does. And combining those two together on a daily routine and a daily practice can have dramatic effect on your every part of your life. Relationships, community, momentum, work ethic. Yeah.
It's good. Yeah. What you were just saying about it being, I think you were saying about being tricky. What I really love with us as architects and designers is the challenge, and going back to the constant learning and growing, is that we are exposed to these facets that are not traditionally part of an architecture and designer profession or even point of interest. It's beyond the aesthetics. It's really seeing where society is going and really seeing what is another level of purpose and meaning that we can bring into our spaces and educate ourselves around those topics. That really just excites me, that level of purpose and meaning, to bring that into the spaces. And who would have thought 20 years ago that we would sit here and talk about pillars of health and wellness in the context of design and architecture? Of course, there's always people that have done it for a long time, but just more the consciousness and awareness and the demand from consumers, guests, people now for this to really be able to support it and flourish just makes me very excited.
Yeah. That's good. I think we're, like you said, we got to keep pushing the boundaries. We got to keep nudging, pressing, challenging the status quo. I keep talking, for me, if there's one thing I want to achieve in my life, in my professional career, is redesigning the ballroom in a hotel. We go to so many conferences and events where we're supposed to be motivated and inspired, and yet we sit in these artificially lit boxes that are typically freezing cold with the air conditioning on. The lighting is too bright. There's no natural light. You have no connection to where you are. Often we go to beautiful places in the world or in the country, and you've got no idea where you are. You could literally be in a ballroom in any part of the world. And, seriously, I think it's something that can be dramatically improved. And I know the challenge with hotels is that they try and cater for so many different types of functions or guests, whether it's a wedding to a conference to a specialist discussion, and they have to be flexible in size to be able to open up, go away. But I think we can start to see how we can create dedicated event spaces within a hotel that maybe aren't quite as flexible, but they encourage creativity. They connect to the space that we're in, the environment, the location that we're in. They have natural lighting in them. The heating and cooling is regulated. They are more interactive, the way the seating is laid out. It's just, I think there's just a way to do it that ticks a lot of boxes and just changes the traditional ballroom into something a lot more appealing that leaves you energized and inspired when you leave, based on the conversation that's taken place in that room. So that's one thing I'm going to focus on.
I like that approach.
Yeah. Great. Well, this has been a great discussion. Next, we were talking about emotional wellness.
Yes, that's the next dimension we're going to be looking at.
Pillar number 3 of 6. Great. Well, thank you. And
thank you.
See you next week.
See you next week.